My name is Laura Whitmore, 52 years old, a farm woman with calloused hands and a shattered heart. I had just buried Daniel, the only man who ever saw me as a precious gem instead of a doormat. He died suddenly from a heart attack, leaving me in the beautiful farm he built with love over his final 3 years. Right then, while I was still reeling from his unexpected death, at the funeral with hundreds of witnesses, my brother Gregory threw a thick envelope onto my husband's casket. Amidst the sobbing and solemn atmosphere, he coldly said, "This is the only way to avoid disgracing the family." I opened it. Inside were fake debt papers with my forged signature, prepared long in advance to steal the farm while Daniel's body was still warm. That's when I looked straight into Gregory's eyes, a slow smile spreading across my lips. Not the pained smile of a widow, but the cold smile of someone who had just awakened after 52 years of naivety. Have you ever been pushed to the brink by your own family? That night, I swore, a widow with nothing left to lose would be the most dangerous kind. Stay with me, because what I did next will make them regret it for the rest of their lives. Looking back now, I realize I had been groomed my entire life to be invisible, to be the supporting character in everyone else's story. The Whitmore family had 3 princes, Gregory, Thomas, and Martin, and 1 servant, me. From the moment I could walk, I was taught that my role was to open doors, not walk through them. I was 8 when I first discovered I had a gift for painting. I remember finding an old set of watercolors in the attic, probably left by some long-forgotten relative. I spent hours in the barn loft, painting everything I could see: the rolling hills, the old oak tree, our golden retriever Max sleeping in the sun. When I showed my first painting to my father, his reaction wasn't pride, it was annoyance. "Laura, stop wasting time with this nonsense. Your brothers need their boots cleaned." Gregory was the eldest, destined to inherit the family's oil business. Thomas would handle the legal affairs. Martin would manage the real estate. And me? I would smile, stay quiet, and make sure everyone else's dreams came true. That became the family motto, though it was never spoken aloud. Laura exists to serve. When I turned 18, something miraculous happened. My high school art teacher, Mrs. Patterson, submitted my portfolio to the Rhode Island School of Design without telling me. When the acceptance letter arrived, along with a full scholarship, I thought my life was finally beginning. I had never seen my mother cry tears of joy before, and for a brief, shining moment, I believed my family was proud of me. That illusion lasted exactly 3 days. Gregory cornered me in the kitchen while I was making breakfast for everyone, as I had done every morning since I was 12. "You're not going," he said simply, buttering his toast like we were discussing the weather. "What do you mean?" I asked, though my heart was already sinking. "Art school." "You're not going. Thomas needs help with his law school applications. Martin's starting college next year, and Dad's business is expanding. We need you here." "But it's a full scholarship," I whispered. "It won't cost anything." Gregory laughed, that cold, dismissive sound I would hear so many times over the years. "Laura, wake up. You're not special. You paint pretty pictures. So what? The world is full of people who paint pretty pictures, but there's only one you, and your family needs you." I looked to my parents for support, but Dad was already buried in his newspaper, and Mom was suddenly very interested in scrubbing a spotless countertop. The message was clear. This conversation was over, and I had lost. I never made it to art school. Instead, I spent the next 6 years typing letters for Gregory's oil company, driving Thomas to law school interviews, and helping Martin through his business degree. I became a professional ghost, haunting my own life but never really living it. The worst part wasn't the sacrifice itself. It was how naturally everyone accepted it. No one ever said thank you. No one ever acknowledged what I had given up. It was simply expected. like sunrise or gravity? Laura will handle it. Laura doesn't mind. Laura understands her place. I was 24 when I met Daniel at a church social. He was new to town, a quiet man with gentle eyes who worked as a contractor. When he asked me to dance, I actually looked over my shoulder to see who he was really talking to. No one had ever noticed me at social functions before. I was just the woman who helped serve punch and clean up afterward. Daniel was different. He listened when I spoke. He asked about my day, my thoughts, my dreams. When I mentioned that I used to paint, his eyes lit up with genuine interest. "Do you still have any of your work?" he asked. I was embarrassed to admit that I had hidden them all in the barn loft, covered in dust and cobwebs. But the next Sunday, Daniel asked to see them. I led him up to the loft, my heart pounding with anxiety. No one had looked at my paintings in years. He stood in stunned silence for what felt like an eternity, moving from canvas to canvas. Finally, he turned to me with tears in his eyes. "Laura, these are extraordinary. You have a gift, a real gift." I had forgotten what it felt like to be seen, to be valued for something other than my usefulness. When Daniel proposed 6 months later, it wasn't grand or dramatic. We were sitting on his truck tailgate, sharing a sandwich and watching the sunset. "I want to build a life with you," he said simply. "A life where your dreams matter as much as mine." My family's reaction to our engagement was predictably lukewarm. They liked Daniel well enough. He was respectful and hardworking, but they saw our marriage as a potential complication to their comfortable arrangement. "You'll still be able to help out, right?" Gregory asked at our engagement dinner. "I mean, marriage doesn't mean you stop being family." Even then, I should have seen the warning signs. But I was so desperate for love and acceptance that I convinced myself things would change once I was married. Surely they would respect my new status, my new life. I was wrong. The first few years of marriage were the happiest of my life. Daniel and I lived in a small house he built with his own hands, and slowly, carefully, I began to paint again. He converted the spare bedroom into a studio, complete with north-facing windows and built-in storage for supplies. "This is your sanctuary," he told me. "No one else is allowed in here unless you invite them." But my family had other ideas. Gregory called constantly with emergencies that required my immediate attention. Thomas needed help preparing for a big case. Martin's wife had left him, and he needed someone to watch his kids. Every time I tried to establish boundaries, I was met with the same manipulative tactics they had used my entire life. "Family comes first, Laura," Mom would say with that disappointed sigh that could cut through steel. "I raised you better than this." "We're not asking for much," Gregory would add. "Just a little help when we need it. Isn't that what family is for?" And like the well-trained daughter I had been raised to be, I would abandon my easel, my dreams, my precious moments of peace, and rush to solve whatever crisis they had manufactured. Daniel watched this pattern for 3 years before he finally confronted me about it. "Laura, they're using you," he said gently as I packed yet another overnight bag to help Thomas prepare for another trial. "Can't you see what they're doing?" "They're my family," I replied automatically, the words worn smooth by repetition. "No," Daniel said firmly. "Family doesn't treat each other this way. Family doesn't demand that one person sacrifice everything while everyone else gets to live their dreams." That night, lying in yet another hotel room while helping Thomas organize files, I stared at the ceiling and tried to remember the last time any of my brothers had asked how I was doing. Really asked, not as a prelude to requesting a favor. I couldn't recall a single instance. The breaking point came when I was 28. I had been selected for a regional art exhibition. my first real recognition as an artist. I was scheduled to attend the opening reception on a Saturday evening, an event I had been anticipating for months. That morning, Gregory called with his usual imperious tone. "Laura, I need you to watch Dad today. He's having one of his episodes, and I have a golf tournament." "But Gregory, tonight is my art show opening. I told everyone about this weeks ago." "Your what?" He sounded genuinely puzzled, as if I had mentioned plans to travel to Mars. "My art exhibition. You know, the one I've been working toward for months? The one that could change my career?" There was a long pause. Then, "Laura, be realistic. It's a little art show in a community center. Dad needs real help with real problems. Stop being selfish and come over here." I went. Of course I went. I missed my own opening reception, my moment of triumph, my chance to finally be seen as more than just the family servant. Later, I learned that a gallery owner had attended specifically to see my work, hoping to offer me representation. When I wasn't there to meet him, he assumed I wasn't serious about my art and moved on to other artists. That opportunity never came again. By the time I turned 30, I had stopped painting altogether. The studio Daniel had lovingly created collected dust while I spent my days managing my family's increasingly complex demands. They had trained me so thoroughly to prioritize their needs that I had forgotten I was allowed to have needs of my own. Daniel never stopped believing in me, even when I stopped believing in myself. He would sometimes stand in the doorway of my abandoned studio, looking at the covered easels with an expression of profound sadness. "It's not too late," he would say quietly. "It's never too late to reclaim your dreams." But it felt too late. I felt too late. I had spent so many years being what everyone else needed me to be that I no longer remembered who I actually was underneath all the expectations and obligations. The years blurred together in a haze of family crises and selfless service. I was there for every birthday, every holiday, every manufactured emergency. I organized family reunions, managed aging parents, mediated sibling disputes, and served as the unpaid coordinator of the entire Whitmore clan. I was indispensable and utterly taken for granted. When my parents died within a year of each other, I naturally handled all the arrangements. The funerals, the estate paperwork, the division of belongings, everything fell to me while my brothers continued their important work. At Dad's funeral, the pastor described him as a man blessed with devoted children, and I watched Gregory, Thomas, and Martin accept the praise while I stood invisible in the background, having done 90% of Dad's care in his final months. After the funerals, I naively hoped that maybe now, with our parents gone, my brothers and I could finally develop an adult relationship built on mutual respect. Perhaps they would see me as their equal, their sister, rather than their servant. Instead, they simply transferred their expectations seamlessly to the next generation. Gregory's children needed tutoring. Thomas needed help with his campaign for district attorney. Martin's business required bookkeeping assistance that somehow only I could provide. The pattern was so deeply entrenched, so fundamentally woven into the fabric of our family dynamic, that it never occurred to any of them that it might change. I was Laura. I was reliable. I was available. I was theirs. But something began shifting in me during those lonely middle years. Maybe it was watching Daniel build his contracting business through honest work and genuine relationships. Maybe it was seeing my friends' children grow up and leave home, pursuing their own dreams while their parents cheered them on. Or maybe it was simply the accumulation of decades of small humiliations and invisible sacrifices that finally reached a critical mass. Whatever it was, by the time I turned 45, I had begun to experience something I had never felt before: anger. Not the hot, explosive kind that burns itself out quickly, but the slow, steady kind that burrows deep and changes you from the inside out. I started saying no. Small no's at first. I couldn't babysit on short notice. I couldn't drop everything to help with non-emergency tasks. Each refusal was met with shock, disappointment, and increasingly manipulative pressure tactics. "You've changed, Laura," Mom said accusingly during one of our phone calls. "You used to be so giving, so selfless. I don't know what's gotten into you." What had gotten into me was the radical realization that I was a human being with my own life, my own needs, my own right to exist beyond my utility to others. It was a revelation so simple and yet so revolutionary that it literally changed how I moved through the world. Daniel noticed the change immediately and encouraged it wholeheartedly. "I've been waiting 45 years to meet the real Laura," he said one evening as we sat on our porch, watching the sunset. "I always knew she was in there." But my family didn't share his enthusiasm. The more I asserted myself, the more aggressive their tactics became. Guilt trips escalated to emotional blackmail. Disappointment hardened into anger. They couldn't understand why their reliable, accommodating Laura was suddenly setting boundaries and prioritizing her own needs. The final straw came 3 years ago, when I was 49. Daniel had been diagnosed with a minor heart condition that required surgery and several weeks of recovery. For the first time in my adult life, I told my family that I would be unavailable to help with anything non-essential while I cared for my husband. Gregory's response was immediate and harsh. "So now you're too good for your own family? You think your husband is more important than the people who raised you?" "Yes," I said simply. "My husband is more important to me than people who only call when they need something." It was the first completely honest thing I had ever said to them, and the silence that followed was deafening. That was when they decided I needed to be taught a lesson. 3 years ago, when Daniel was diagnosed with that heart condition, something shifted irreversibly in my family's treatment of me. It wasn't just that I had chosen my husband over their convenience, it was that I had finally said out loud what we all knew, but had never acknowledged. They only valued me for what I could do for them. The punishment was swift and systematic. Where once I had been overwhelmed with requests for help, now I was met with icy silence. Family gatherings happened without me. Important decisions were made without my input. When I called to check on people, conversations were brief and stilted. I had committed the unforgivable sin of prioritizing my own family over theirs, and they intended to make me pay. At first, I was hurt. Despite everything, I still craved their approval and acceptance. But as weeks turned to months, something unexpected happened. I began to feel lighter. Without the constant pressure of their demands, I had time to remember who I was beyond my role as the family caretaker. Daniel recovered beautifully from his surgery, and during his convalescence, we spent hours talking about dreams we had deferred and possibilities we had never explored. It was during one of these conversations that he made a suggestion that would change everything. "Laura," he said, taking my hand as we sat on our porch swing, "what if we built something together? Something that was just ours?" "What do you mean?" I asked. His eyes lit up with an excitement I hadn't seen in years. "A horse farm. You always loved horses as a child, and I know you miss having animals around. We could start small, maybe rescue a few horses that need rehabilitation, and you could have a proper studio again, somewhere to paint the horses, the land, the life we're building." The idea was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. We had modest savings, but starting a horse farm would require significant investment and years of hard work. More importantly, it would mean fully committing to our own dreams instead of serving everyone else's. "Are you sure?" I asked. "It would mean less time available to help my family when they need it." Daniel's expression grew serious. "Laura, honey, when was the last time they actually needed your help? Really needed it? not just wanted it because it was convenient. I tried to think of an example and came up empty. The truth was, most of their emergencies were either manufactured crises or problems they were perfectly capable of solving themselves. They had simply grown accustomed to having me handle the inconvenient details of their lives. Besides, Daniel continued, you deserve to have something that's yours. Something beautiful that you helped create. That conversation planted a seed that grew steadily over the following months. We began researching horse breeds, farm management, and the logistics of starting our own operation. Daniel's contracting experience would be invaluable for building facilities, and I found myself sketching barn layouts and dreaming of morning rides through our own pastures. The more we planned, the more excited I became. For the first time since I was 18, I had something to look forward to that wasn't contingent on someone else's approval or needs. But my family had other ideas. When they learned about our plans, somehow Gregory always found out about family members' business ventures. The reaction was swift and united. Suddenly, after months of silence, my phone was ringing constantly. Emergency after emergency arose that required my immediate attention and presence. Thomas was having marriage problems and needed daily counseling sessions. Martin's business was struggling and required my bookkeeping expertise. Gregory's teenage son was acting out and needed his aunt's stabilizing influence. Each crisis was presented as urgent and temporary, but they kept coming with suspicious timing that always seemed to coincide with important steps in our farm planning. It's almost like they know, I said to Daniel one evening after spending yet another day managing one of Thomas's manufactured crises instead of meeting with our architect. Of course they know, Daniel replied. They're not stupid, Laura. They can see that you're building something that doesn't include them, and they're panicking. His words hit me like a physical blow, not because they were harsh, but because they were undeniably true. My family wasn't experiencing a sudden run of bad luck. They were systematically sabotaging our progress by reasserting their claims on my time and energy. The realization should have made me angry, but instead, I felt something much more dangerous: clarity. If they wanted to play games, I could learn the rules too. I started documenting everything, every phone call, every request, every manufactured crisis. I noted the timing, the alleged urgency, and how each situation miraculously resolved itself once I had missed whatever farm-related appointment they had successfully sabotaged. The pattern was undeniable and surprisingly sophisticated. They had clearly coordinated their efforts to maximize disruption while maintaining plausible deniability. If confronted, each brother could truthfully claim that his individual requests had been legitimate. It was only when viewed collectively that their strategy became obvious. But knowledge alone wasn't enough. I needed leverage. That's when I remembered something my father had told me years ago, during one of his rare moments of candor. We had been going through old family papers after my mother's death, and he had pulled aside a sealed envelope. Laura, he had said, if anything ever happens to me, this envelope needs to go to you. Not your brothers. You. There are things about this family's finances that only you can be trusted to handle responsibly. At the time, I had assumed he was being overly dramatic, but now, sitting in my kitchen with Daniel and reviewing months of my family's manipulative tactics, I remembered that envelope with crystal clarity. It was in his desk, in our family home that Gregory now owned and occupied with his wife and children. Getting access would require strategy, but I had something my brothers had never developed: patience. The opportunity came 3 months later, when Gregory's family took their annual ski trip to Colorado. They would be gone for 10 days, and Gregory had mentioned needing someone to check on the house and collect mail. In the past, this would have fallen to me automatically, but given our strained relationship, he had asked Mrs. Henderson from next door. Mrs. Henderson had been our neighbor for 30 years and had known me since I was a child. When I explained that I wanted to pick up a few personal items from Dad's old study, things that had sentimental value but had been overlooked during the estate division, she was happy to let me in. "Of course, dear," she said, handing me the spare key. "You take all the time you need. That house has been in your family longer than anyone else's." I waited until evening to enter the house, when neighborhood activity was minimal and I was unlikely to be observed. The familiar smell of my childhood home, a mixture of old wood, my mother's lavender sachets, and the faint residue of my father's pipe tobacco, hit me like a wave of complicated emotions. I made my way directly to Dad's study, now converted into Gregory's home office but still containing most of the original furniture. The desk I remembered was there, massive and imposing, with dozens of small drawers and hidden compartments that had fascinated me as a child. It took me 20 minutes to find the envelope, tucked behind a false back in one of the smaller drawers. My name was written on it in my father's distinctive handwriting, along with a date from just 2 months before his death. Inside were documents that changed everything. Financial records going back 30 years showed a pattern of systematic fraud that made my blood run cold. Gregory's oil business, Thomas's law practice, and Martin's real estate ventures had all been built on a foundation of illegal activities that would destroy them if exposed. Tax evasion, bribery, money laundering, fraudulent environmental impact reports, the list went on and on. But the most damning evidence involved the mineral rights to vast tracts of land throughout the region. Through a series of shady deals and outright theft, my brothers had quietly gained control of oil and gas deposits worth millions of dollars. The most shocking revelation was that these mineral rights had originally belonged to our family's estate, including the land where Daniel and I now lived. My brothers had illegally transferred these rights to their own names after our parents' deaths, using their positions of trust as estate executors to steal what should have been divided equally among all 4 siblings. I sat in my father's chair, reading document after document that revealed the true scope of their criminal enterprise. No wonder they had been so determined to keep me occupied and distracted. If I had ever looked closely at the estate paperwork or hired my own attorney, their entire house of cards would have collapsed. But the envelope contained more than just evidence of their crimes. There was also a letter from my father, written in the shaky handwriting of his final illness. "My dearest Laura, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and I pray that you never needed to find these documents. But if your brothers have continued down the path I fear they have chosen, then you must know the truth. I have spent the last 5 years of my life trying to undo the damage they have caused, but I am old and tired, and they are clever. They have stolen not just from strangers, but from you, from the inheritance that should have secured your future and Daniel's. I could not stop them while I lived, but perhaps you can stop them now. You are the only one of my children who has remained honest, the only one who can be trusted with this knowledge. The farm you and Daniel are planning to build sits on land that contains one of the largest undeveloped oil deposits in the region. Your brothers know this, which is why they will do everything in their power to prevent you from succeeding. They cannot allow you to prosper on land that they believe should be theirs. But it is not theirs, Laura. It is yours, by right and by law. The mineral rights were transferred illegally, and these documents prove it. I am sorry I could not protect you from them while I lived. Perhaps now I can protect you in death. Use this knowledge wisely. You are stronger than you know. All my love, Dad." I sat in the darkness of that study for nearly an hour, absorbing the magnitude of what I had discovered. My entire adult life had been shaped by my family's financial crimes. Every sacrifice I had made, every dream I had deferred, every moment of manipulation and control. It had all been in service of protecting their criminal empire. But now I had something they didn't know I possessed, the power to destroy them all. The question was what to do with it. My first instinct was to march directly to the police with the evidence. But as satisfying as that might be, it would also be chaotic and potentially self-destructive. If my brothers were arrested and their assets frozen, the resulting legal battles could take years to resolve. In the meantime, Daniel and I would be left in financial limbo, unable to move forward with our own plans while everything was tied up in court. No, this required a more sophisticated approach. If my family had taught me anything over the years, it was the value of patience and strategic thinking. I photographed every document, uploaded digital copies to a secure cloud storage service, and placed the originals in a safety deposit box at a bank in the next county. Then I began planning my approach. The beauty of having evidence of criminal activity is that it gives you incredible leverage in negotiations. My brothers could choose to cooperate with reasonable terms, or they could face criminal prosecution and financial ruin. Either way, I would finally get what was rightfully mine. But first, I needed to test their intentions. I needed to see just how far they were willing to go to prevent my success. I returned the envelope to its hiding place, locked up the house, and returned the key to Mrs. Henderson with heartfelt thanks for her trust. Then I went home to Daniel and began the next phase of our planning. Over the following weeks, I made a point of accelerating our farm preparations. We scheduled meetings with contractors, ordered materials for barn construction, and put deposits down on our first rescue horses. I made sure these activities were visible in public, advertising our progress to anyone who might be watching. The response was swift and predictable. Within days of each major step forward, new emergencies arose that required my immediate attention. But now that I understood the game, their tactics seemed almost childish in their transparency. More importantly, I began to notice escalating aggression in their approaches. What had started as manipulation was evolving into something closer to sabotage. Someone canceled our contractor without authorization. Materials we had ordered went missing. The horses we had planned to purchase were suddenly unavailable, despite previous commitments from the seller. These weren't coincidences or bad luck. They were acts of deliberate interference. My brothers weren't just trying to control me anymore. They were actively trying to destroy my dreams. That's when I knew it was time to take the gloves off. I scheduled a family dinner at the fanciest restaurant in town, ostensibly to clear the air and work out our differences. I wanted them comfortable, confident, and completely unprepared for what was coming. As I prepared for that dinner, I felt something I had never experienced before. The thrill of having power over people who had spent their lives making me feel powerless. For the first time in our relationship, I held all the cards. I dressed carefully for the occasion, a simple black dress that made me look serious and competent, minimal jewelry, and the kind of understated confidence that comes from knowing you can destroy your enemies with a single phone call. But I wasn't planning to destroy them. Not yet. First, I was going to give them the chance to do the right thing. I was going to offer them the opportunity to treat me with the respect and honesty they should have shown me my entire life. And when they inevitably refused, because people like my brothers never change, never learn, never acknowledge their mistakes, I would be ready with consequences they never saw coming. The game was about to change, and for the first time in 52 years, Laura Whitmore was going to win. The dinner at Le Chateau was everything I had hoped it would be. Elegant, intimate, and completely private. I had specifically requested the corner table in the back room, where our conversation couldn't be overheard by other diners. My brothers arrived exactly on time, which told me they were taking this meeting seriously. Gregory looked confident, almost smug, as he settled into his chair and ordered an expensive bottle of wine. Thomas was more cautious, his lawyer's instincts making him wary of any situation he couldn't control. Martin seemed nervous, fidgeting with his napkin and avoiding direct eye contact. "Well, Laura," Gregory said with that patronizing smile I had endured my entire life, "I'm glad you finally came to your senses. We've all been worried about this horse farm nonsense. It's not too late to invest in something more practical." "Like what?" I asked pleasantly, sipping my water. "Thomas has an opportunity to expand his practice," Gregory continued. "He could use a silent partner, someone with good business sense who won't interfere with the actual legal work. And Martin's looking at some prime commercial real estate that would be perfect for your retirement fund." I nodded thoughtfully, as if seriously considering their proposals. "And what happens to the farm Daniel and I are building?" "Oh, that," Gregory waved dismissively. "Honey, you and Daniel are getting older. Taking care of horses is hard work, physical work. You'd be much better off with some nice passive investments that don't require you to muck stalls at 5 a.m. Thomas leaned forward earnestly. "We're not trying to control your life, Laura. We just want what's best for you. Family looks out for family." The word family hung in the air between us like a loaded gun. This was my moment, the perfect opening to reveal what I knew and watch their comfortable world crumble. But I found myself curious about something else first. "Can I ask you all something?" I said, setting down my glass carefully. "Do you remember my 18th birthday? When I got the scholarship to art school?" The three of them exchanged glances. Gregory shrugged. "Vaguely, some local thing, right?" "The Rhode Island School of Design," I corrected quietly. "Full scholarship. I was accepted into one of the most prestigious art programs in the country." "Right," Thomas said, clearly not remembering. "But you decided to stay home and help the family instead." "Very mature decision." I stared at him for a long moment. "I didn't decide anything, Thomas. You all decided for me. And do you know what happened to that scholarship when I didn't accept it?" None of them answered. "It went to another student. A girl from Ohio whose family sold their car to help pay for her supplies and living expenses. She graduated 4 years later and now has paintings in the Metropolitan Museum of Art." The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Martin cleared his throat. "Laura, that was over 30 years ago. Why are we talking about ancient history?" "Because," I said softly, "I want to understand something. When you made the decision that I couldn't go to art school, did any of you, even for a moment, consider what I wanted, what I had worked for, what I was giving up?" Gregory's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Laura, you're being ridiculous. We were young. Families make sacrifices for each other. That's what families do." "Sacrifices," I repeated. "Tell me about the sacrifices you've made, Gregory. What did you give up for the family?" His face flushed slightly. "I've given plenty. I've supported this family financially for decades. I've made sure everyone was taken care of." "With stolen money," I said quietly. The words dropped into the conversation like a stone into still water. The ripples of shock and fear spread across their faces in real time. Gregory went pale. Thomas's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Martin actually pushed back from the table. "What did you say?" Gregory whispered. I reached into my purse and placed a single document on the table, a copy of one of the financial records I had discovered in Dad's desk. It was a bank transfer showing the illegal diversion of mineral rights that should have been part of the estate. Thomas grabbed the paper with shaking hands. His legal training kicked in immediately as he scanned the document. "Where did you get this?" "From Dad's desk," I replied calmly. "Along with 30 years' worth of similar documents. Tax evasion, money laundering, fraudulent environmental reports. bribery of government officials. Shall I go on? The transformation in their demeanor was instantaneous and complete. Gone were the condescending smiles and patronizing attitudes. In their place was naked fear. "Laura," Martin stammered, "you don't understand. It's not what it looks like." "It looks like a criminal enterprise," I said evenly. "It looks like you've been stealing from landowners, lying to government agencies, and evading taxes for decades. It also looks like you stole my inheritance and used it to fund your crimes." Gregory found his voice first, falling back on his default mode of aggression when threatened. "You're out of your mind. Those documents don't prove anything, and even if they did, you're implicated too. Your family, you benefited from our success." I smiled, the same cold smile I had given him at Daniel's funeral. "Actually, Gregory, I'm not implicated in anything. I was deliberately excluded from your business dealings, remember? You made sure I never knew anything about the real source of your wealth. You kept me busy with family obligations while you committed felonies." Thomas was rapidly reading through the document, his legal mind processing the implications. "How many of these do you have?" "All of them," I replied. "Every transaction, every fraudulent deal, every illegal transfer. Dad was thorough in his record keeping." "What do you want?" Gregory asked bluntly. This was the moment I had been building toward for months, the moment when I would finally have power over the people who had controlled my entire life. "I want what was always mine," I said simply. "I want the mineral rights to my land restored to my name. I want the money you stole from my inheritance, with interest. And I want you to stay out of my life forever." "And if we refuse?" Thomas asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then I take these documents to the FBI, the IRS, and the State Environmental Protection Agency. You'll spend the next decade in federal prison, and everything you've built will be seized as proceeds from criminal activity." The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear their minds racing, calculating options, searching for escape routes that didn't exist. Finally, Gregory spoke, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "You're our sister. How can you threaten to destroy your own family?" For a moment, I felt the old familiar pang of guilt, the trained response of a lifetime spent prioritizing everyone else's needs. But then I remembered Daniel's funeral, the fake debt papers, the years of manipulation and control. "You stopped being my family the moment you decided to steal from me," I said quietly. "You're criminals who happen to share my DNA. That's not the same thing." Martin was crying quietly, tears streaming down his face. "Laura, please, I have children, if this comes out. You should have thought about your children before you chose a life of crime," I replied, feeling no sympathy whatsoever. "But here's the thing. I don't want to destroy you. I never did. I just want what's mine, and I want to be left alone to live my life." I pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. "These are the terms. Non-negotiable. You have 72 hours to accept them, or I go to the authorities." Thomas opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was a detailed agreement I had spent weeks preparing with the help of a lawyer in the state capitol, someone with no connections to my family or their network of corruption. The terms were simple, but comprehensive. All mineral rights illegally transferred from the family estate would be returned to my name immediately. I would receive financial compensation equal to the value of oil and gas extracted from my land over the past 15 years, calculated according to current market rates. And most importantly, they would have no further contact with me or interference in my life. "This is extortion," Gregory said weakly. "No," I corrected, "this is justice." Extortion would be if I demanded payment to keep quiet about crimes I had nothing to do with. This is me reclaiming what you stole from me. I stood up, leaving the folder on the table. 72 hours, I repeated. After that, the only negotiation will be with federal prosecutors. As I turned to leave, Thomas called out desperately, "Laura, wait! Can we at least discuss this? Work out some kind of compromise?" I turned back to look at them, really look at them, for what I knew would be the last time. These men who had shaped my entire life through their selfishness and cruelty now sat before me broken and afraid. I felt no satisfaction in their fear, but I also felt no pity. "There is no compromise," I said simply. "For 52 years, I compromised. I gave up my dreams, my opportunities, my identity, all to make your lives easier. Now it's your turn to sacrifice something for someone else." I walked out of that restaurant feeling lighter than I had in decades. The weight I had carried my entire life, the obligation to be understanding, accommodating, endlessly forgiving, had finally lifted from my shoulders. 70 hours later, my phone rang. It was Thomas. "We accept your terms," he said quietly. "All of them?" "All of them." Within a week, the legal documents were signed and filed. The mineral rights to my property were restored to my name, along with a substantial financial settlement that would fund not just our horse farm, but secure our future for the rest of our lives. But the most valuable thing I gained wasn't money, it was freedom. Daniel and I threw ourselves into building our farm with a joy and energy I hadn't felt since I was 18. Every fence post we set, every stall we built, every horse we rescued felt like an act of rebellion against the people who had tried to keep me small and invisible. Our first rescue horse was a beautiful paint mare named Liberty, a name that felt more appropriate than I could have imagined. She had been neglected and abused by previous owners, but with patience and care, she began to trust again. Watching her run freely through our pastures for the first time brought tears to my eyes. I set up my art studio in the loft above the main barn, with windows that looked out over the rolling hills where our horses grazed. For the first time in over 30 years, I began painting again, not as a hobby or a distraction, but as a celebration of the life I had finally claimed as my own. My first painting in decades was a portrait of Liberty running through morning mist, her mane flowing like a banner of freedom. When I stepped back and looked at it, I realized I had unconsciously painted her with the same expression of joy and liberation that I saw in my own mirror every morning. The local art community welcomed me back with enthusiasm. My first exhibition in over 3 decades sold out on opening night, with several pieces going to collectors in New York and California. The local newspaper ran a feature story about my artistic renaissance, though they had no idea how literally accurate that description was. But the greatest validation came from an unexpected source. 6 months after our confrontation at the restaurant, I received a letter from the current scholarship recipient at the Rhode Island School of Design, a young woman who had learned about my story through the local news coverage. "Dear Mrs. Whitmore," she wrote, "I hope you don't mind me writing to you, but I wanted you to know how much your story has inspired me. I almost dropped out of school last year when my family pressured me to come home and help with their business instead of pursuing my impractical art degree. But when I read about how you reclaimed your artistic dreams after 30 years, it gave me the courage to stay and finish what I started. I graduate next month, and I wanted you to know that your example helped me believe that dreams deferred don't have to be dreams denied. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to choose yourself." I framed that letter and hung it in my studio, where it serves as a daily reminder that our choices ripple outward in ways we can never fully predict. As for my brothers, I kept my word completely. I had no further contact with them, and they honored their agreement to leave me alone. I heard through local gossip that Gregory's oil business had struggled after losing access to the mineral deposits they had illegally controlled. Thomas had to scale back his law practice significantly. Martin's real estate ventures had become much more conservative and less profitable. But I felt no satisfaction in their reduced circumstances. Revenge, I had learned, was far less rewarding than simply living well. 2 years after that dinner at Le Chateau, Daniel and I were hosting our first annual rescue horse adoption event when a car pulled up our long gravel driveway. I didn't recognize the vehicle, but something about the hesitant way it approached made me curious. A young woman got out, maybe 25 years old, with the same dark hair and strong jaw that marked her as unmistakably a Whitmore. She approached slowly, clearly nervous. "Mrs. Whitmore?" she said tentatively. "I'm Sarah. Gregory's daughter. I was wondering if we could talk." My first instinct was to send her away. I had made a clean break from that family, and I wasn't interested in being drawn back into their drama. But something in her expression, a vulnerability that reminded me of my younger self, made me pause. "What about?" I asked carefully. She looked around at the farm, at the horses grazing peacefully in their pastures, at the obvious evidence of the life Daniel and I had built together. "I wanted to apologize," she said quietly. "For my father. For all of them. I know what they did to you, and I'm ashamed to be related to them." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda. All I saw was genuine remorse and something else, a kind of desperate hope that maybe, possibly, not all of the Whitmore family was beyond redemption. "What do you want from me, Sarah?" I asked gently. Tears filled her eyes. "Nothing," she said quickly. "I don't want anything. I'm starting my own life, and I wanted you to know that not all of us are like them. Some of us think what they did to you was unforgivable." We talked for an hour on my front porch, and I learned that Sarah was a veterinary student who had been working her way through school without help from her father. She had learned about the family's criminal activities during the legal proceedings and had been horrified by what she discovered. "I changed my name," she told me. "Legally, I don't want to be associated with what they did. But I also didn't want to disappear completely without telling you how sorry I am. You deserve so much better from your family." When she left that day, I found myself thinking about cycles, how damage gets passed down through generations, but also how it can be broken by people brave enough to choose differently. Sarah visits occasionally now, helping with the horses and learning about ethical treatment of animals that extends far beyond veterinary care. She's become something I never expected to have again. Family that I actually chose, rather than family that was imposed on me by accident of birth. As I write this, 3 years have passed since that confrontation in the restaurant. I'm 55 years old, and for the first time in my life, I wake up every morning excited about the day ahead rather than dreading the obligations it might bring. Our rescue horse farm has grown beyond anything Daniel and I originally imagined. We now house 43 horses, employ 6 full-time staff members, and have facilitated over 200 successful adoptions. My art studio has become a pilgrimage site for other women who are reclaiming dreams they thought were lost forever. But the most profound change isn't in my circumstances. It's in how I see myself. I am no longer Laura the caretaker, Laura the peacemaker, Laura the family servant. I am simply Laura, an artist, a horse lover, a woman who finally learned that her own dreams matter as much as anyone else's. The lesson I've learned is both simple and revolutionary. Love that demands you disappear isn't love at all. Real love, the kind Daniel showed me, the kind I now show myself, creates space for you to become more yourself, not less. People often ask me if I regret the years I lost, the opportunities I missed, the dreams I deferred. The answer is complicated. I regret the choices that were made for me, but I don't regret the strength I gained from surviving them. I don't regret the empathy I developed from being overlooked, even though I wish I had learned to value myself sooner. Most importantly, I don't regret the woman I became through the process of reclaiming my life. She's someone I genuinely like and respect, someone I would choose as a friend, someone I'm proud to be. If you're listening to this and recognize yourself in my story, if you're the one who always sacrifices, always accommodates, always puts everyone else first, I want you to know something. You have permission to choose yourself. You have permission to say no. You have permission to want things for yourself and to work toward making those dreams reality. It's never too late to start over. It's never too late to demand respect. And it's never too late to discover who you really are underneath all the expectations others have placed on you. Your family might not like it when you start setting boundaries and prioritizing your own needs. They might try to guilt you, manipulate you, or punish you for changing the rules of the game. But people who truly love you will adapt to your growth, even if it takes time. And people who can adapt to treating you with basic respect have revealed something important about their character. The question I want to leave you with is the same one I asked myself that night after Daniel's funeral. If not now, when? When will you finally give yourself permission to matter in your own life? Your dreams are waiting. Your authentic self is waiting. The life you were meant to live is waiting. What are you waiting for? If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or if you're ready to start choosing yourself, please share your story in the comments below. Let's build a community of people who refuse to be defined by other people's limitations. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of courage, transformation, and the radical act of choosing yourself. Because your story matters, your dreams matter, and you matter exactly as you are.